So the Velvet Underground are one of those bands that are unassailably cool. They've always had that position of being just one of those bands you should listen to. And I think unlike a lot of bands from the 60s, they don't even look dated. You know, you see like Jefferson Airplane and Country Joe and the Fish, and they look very 60s. But that look that the Velvet Underground had was timeless. And a lot of the music they produced was very timeless as well, and it's been very, very influential.
Shiny, shiny, shiny boots of leather. Whiplash, girl child in the dark.
And it's that old maxim, usually attributed to Brian Eno, that although he claims that Lou Reed said it to him, but it goes, the first Velvet Underground record sold 30,000 copies in like the first 5 years, but every single one of the people who bought that record went on to form their own band. The point they're making is that a band's importance and a band's influence can, not necessarily be reflected in the amount of money they make. So what has that got to do with D&D, and why am I talking about it? Well, this idea that everyone who bought that album went on to form their own band, I think is reflected in D&D. I think all the original people around the culture of D&D went on to become games designers. There's an interesting story about Ken St. Andre, who created Tunnels and Trolls for Flying Buffalo Games, I think. He got a copy of that early edition of D&D, and he loved the concept of it, but he couldn't understand the rules. He wrote an entire rules system. It was completely different. It was much simpler, much easier to understand, much more sort of whimsical. He created his own rule system, but he still called it D&D, because when it came time to publish, couldn't call it that, so he changed it to Tunnels and Trolls. I think the ampersands and alliteration theme got carried through quite a lot in those early days. But similarly, you look at computer games. David Ewalt, who wrote Of Dice and Men, he actually came to write that book. He'd played D&D as a kid. He kind of got away from it in his later years, but he became the tech editor at Forbes magazine, and he'd always be interviewing people in tech and people in video games development, and it would always be the same story. They'd always say, I played D&D as a kid. I was always influenced by it. I always wanted to kind of create my D&D games in a computer. I think if you read about the creation of Doom, I think one of the original inspirations was their D&D campaign. I think someone opened up a portal to hell and created a hell on earth in the D&D game, and that's basically what Doom is. But I think there's a very, very strong case to be made when you look at games development, tabletop games and video games. But also, if you were playing D&D back in the late 70s and early 80s, that first D&D box, the original D&D, and first edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, some of those rules were so tricky. Those rule books were, they were all over the place. So people would end up homebrewing. They would create their own rules. They'd make modifications. It would be their interpretations of the rules rather than the intention of the rules. So in a very real sense, they sort of had to become games developers in a smaller sense, just to run the games. And I think even now, even with 5th edition, a game where you can do absolutely everything, it requires a lot of rules. I mean, we're told, games got to be fun. Whatever you do at the table is down to you at the end of the day. You're developing games, you're creating rules, you're running a system, basically. So, there you go. Gary Gygax is the Lou Reed of gaming.